Last year, my garden produced just over 1,900 pounds of food from a plot that is barely a quarter acre. That is more than it produced 5 years ago, and more than it produced 10 years ago. Every single year, that same piece of ground gives my family more food than the year before. Now, most gardeners I talk to experience the opposite. They start strong the first year or two, then yields slowly drop. The soil gets tired. The tomatoes get smaller. The squash produces fewer fruit. So, they buy more fertilizer, more amendments, more products off the shelf, and the garden still declines. I spent nearly 15 years trapped in that exact cycle before I figured out what I was doing wrong. Here is what changed everything. I spent time around my Amish neighbors, particularly a man named Eli, who farms about 2 miles down the road from my homestead in Holmes County, Ohio. And I saw something that completely reset my thinking about soil and food production. Eli has been working the same ground his father worked and his grandfather before that. That soil has been in continuous food production for well over 100 years, and it is not tired. It is the richest, darkest, most alive ground I have ever put my hands in. His garden feeds a family of 11, and he has never once bought a bag of synthetic fertilizer. What Eli showed me was not a single trick or a quick fix. It was a complete system. 6 specific practices that work together to make soil more fertile every single year instead of less. Today, I am going to walk you through exactly how this system works so you can start building the same kind of compounding fertility on your own ground. Whether you are feeding 2 people or 12, these methods scale. And stay with me to the end because I am going to share a mid-season rescue technique Eli taught me that can revive even the most exhausted garden bed in about 3 weeks. Most gardeners have never heard of it, and it uses ingredients you probably already have. I want to be straight with you. I did this the wrong way for close to 20 years. When I first started homesteading, I thought good gardening meant good inputs. Every spring, I would haul in bags of 10-10-10 fertilizer, spread it across my beds, till it all in, and plant. First couple of years, things looked great. By year 5, I was using twice as much fertilizer for about 2/3 of the yield. By year 10, I was fighting compacted soil, pest problems, and tomato plants that looked like they had given up on life. If that sounds familiar, you are not alone. I was right there with you, and so are most of the gardeners I talk to. We have all been taught the same basic approach. Feed the plant, add nutrients, till the soil, repeat. It seems logical, but it is fundamentally backwards, and I did not understand why until I started paying attention to what Eli was doing on the other side of that fence. The first time I walked through his garden, I asked him what fertilizer he used. He just looked at me like I had asked him what color the sky was. He said, "Hank, I do not feed my plants. I feed my soil, and the soil feeds everything." That one sentence took me about 3 years to fully understand. But once I did, my garden changed permanently. What they figured out through generations of observation is rooted in a concept called Gelassenheit, which roughly means yielding to the natural order. Now, that might sound philosophical, but for the Amish, it is deeply practical. When you are feeding 8 to 12 people off a few acres with no tractor, no chemical inputs, and no margin for crop failure, you cannot afford to fight nature. You have to work with it. Here's what that looks like in the garden. Eli does not try to override what the soil wants to do. He does not blast it with synthetic nitrogen to force fast growth. He does not till it into powder every spring to make it look clean and ready. Instead, he supports the biological systems that are already in the ground. The fungi, the bacteria, the earthworms, the whole invisible workforce that builds fertility naturally. His job, as he sees it, is to create the conditions where that workforce thrives. And when it thrives, it does the heavy lifting for him. This is not mystical. Research out of Ohio State University has confirmed that soils managed with these biological principles show measurably higher organic matter, better water retention, and increased nutrient availability year over year. The Amish figured this out through necessity and observation long before the university put numbers to it. Now let me show you exactly how to put this into practice. The first thing you need to do is stop destroying what you are trying to build. I am talking about tilling. Now I know that is going to be controversial because most of us were taught that tilling is how you prepare a garden. I tilled every single spring for 18 years. It felt productive. The soil looked beautiful afterwards, dark and loose and ready to plant. But here is what I did not understand, and what Eli helped me see. When you till, you are shredding the fungal networks in your soil. These are called mycorrhizal networks, and they are essentially a second root system for your plants. They extend the reach of every root by as much as 700%, pulling in water and nutrients your plant could never access on its own. Every time you run a tiller through that ground, you destroy months of fungal growth in about 10 minutes. Then you wonder why your plants need more fertilizer every year. It is because you keep killing the system that was feeding them for free. Here is what Eli does instead. He uses what I call the Amish layering method, which is basically sheet composting applied directly to his beds. In the fall, after he pulls his crops, he lays down about 4 inches of rough compost. Not finished compost, but the chunky, half broken down stuff that still has visible plant material in it. On top of that, he puts about 2 inches of aged manure, horse or cow from his own animals. Then he covers the whole thing with a thick layer of straw about 6 inches deep. He leaves that all winter. By spring, the bottom layers have been pulled down into the soil by earthworms and broken down by fungi and bacteria. The straw has compressed to about 2 inches and acts as a natural mulch. He plants right through it. No tilling, no disruption. The soil structure stays intact, and every year it builds on itself. If you do not have access to animal manure, you can substitute with about 3 inches of finished compost from your own bin, which I will get to in a moment. The key is the layering. Rough organic matter on the bottom, finer material in the middle, straw or leaf mulch on top. Let biology do the mixing for you. Your hands should never need to touch a tiller again. Now that your soil is protected, here is where things get really interesting. You need a compost system that actually keeps up with a serious garden. And the Amish approach is the simplest and most effective I have ever seen for homestead scale production. Eli runs a 3-bin system. Each bin is roughly 4 feet wide, 4 feet deep, and 4 feet tall, built from old pallets wired together at the corners. The first bin gets all the fresh material: kitchen scraps, garden waste, animal bedding, manure, anything organic. The second bin is where material goes after it has been in the first bin for about 6 to 8 weeks. He turns it once when he moves it, and that is the only turning he does. The third bin is finished compost, ready to use. The whole cycle from fresh material to finished compost takes about 4 to 5 months in warm weather, closer to 6 or 7 in winter. Now here is the detail that makes this work at scale. Eli adds compost to his garden 4 times a year, not just once. He does a heavy application in fall, about 4 inches like I described. Then a lighter top dressing of about 1 inch of finished compost in early spring, right before planting. Another inch after his first harvest comes off in midsummer, and a final inch in late summer before his fall crops go in. That means his soil is receiving a continuous supply of organic matter and biological activity throughout the entire growing season. The conventional approach of one big amendment in spring and then nothing else leaves your soil running on empty by August. Eli's soil never hits empty. The third practice is one I resisted for years because it felt like wasted effort, and I could not have been more wrong. You need to plant cover crops in every bed that is not actively growing food. Eli never leaves bare soil, ever. If a bed is going to sit empty for even 4 weeks, he seeds it with something. For summer gaps between spring and fall crops, he uses buckwheat. It germinates in about 4 days, reaches maturity in 30 days, and the flowers attract pollinators and beneficial insects that keep pest populations in check. For winter cover, he plants a mix of crimson clover and winter rye. The clover fixes nitrogen from the air and deposits it in the soil through its root nodules, roughly 25 to 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre, depending on conditions. The rye puts down deep roots that break up compaction and add serious organic matter when it dies back in spring. Here is the practical timing. If you are in zones 5 through 7, plant winter cover crops by mid-September to give them time to establish before frost. In zones 3 and 4, get them in by early September. Zones 8 and above, you can push into October. When spring comes, you cut the cover crop at soil level about 3 weeks before you want to plant. Do not pull it. Leave the roots in the ground to decompose and feed the soil biology. Lay the cut tops right on the surface as mulch. I skipped cover crops for 15 years because I thought they were just for big farmers with real acreage. That was one of the biggest mistakes I have ever made in the garden. Once I started using them, my soil organic matter went from about 2% to just over 5% in 3 seasons. You can feel that transformation in your hands when you dig into the bed. Now, what I have shared with you today is a real piece of the puzzle, but it is still just one piece. If you are tired of fighting the same battles every season, if you want a garden that actually works with you instead of against you, then I would really encourage you to check out the guide I put together. It is called the 30-Day Amish Self-Sufficient Garden Protocol. And it is everything I have learned from my Amish neighbors over the last 3 decades, organized into a simple day-by-day plan you can start this season. It covers the full 5 defense layers to build a garden that defends itself from the soil up. It has got the complete 4-bed crop rotation system that stops disease and pests before they ever get a foothold. And it includes the companion planting field guide. So you know exactly what to grow next to what and why. So click the link in the description right below this video. Just scroll down a little and you will see it, and hold it up to the QR code you see on screen right now. A little link will pop up at the top of your phone screen. Just tap that and it will bring you right to the guide. No typing, no searching. Either way works. I think it is the best investment you can make in your garden this year. All right, let us keep going. This next part is where the yield multiplication really happens. You need to rotate your crops using what I call the Amish 4-bed system. Eli divides his garden into 4 main sections, and every year, each crop family moves 1 section clockwise. The rotation goes like this. Section 1 is heavy feeders: tomatoes, corn, squash, peppers, anything that pulls a lot of nitrogen from the soil. Section 2 is legumes: beans and peas, which fix nitrogen back into the ground. Section 3 is root crops: carrots, beets, potatoes, turnips. Section 4 is light feeders: lettuce, herbs, greens, onions. So the heavy feeders get the freshest compost and the most fertile ground. The next year, legumes go into that same bed and replenish the nitrogen those heavy feeders used up. Then root crops go in and their deep roots break up the lower soil layers. Then light feeders go in and thrive on whatever remains while the bed essentially rests and rebuilds. By the time heavy feeders come back around in year 5, that bed has had 3 years of biological recovery plus continuous compost additions. It is more fertile than when the cycle started. The conventional approach is to plant your tomatoes in your best sunny spot every year because that is where they did well last time. I did that for a decade. By year 7, I was fighting early blight every single season, and my yields had dropped by nearly half. That is because tomato family diseases and specific pest populations build up in the soil when you plant the same crop in the same place year after year. Rotation breaks that cycle completely. Eli has never had a serious blight problem, and he has been growing tomatoes for over 40 years on the same ground. If you have a smaller garden, even 3 beds work. Just combine the light feeders and root crops into one group and run a 3-year rotation instead. The principle is the same. Never put the same crop family in the same ground 2 years in a row. Now, here is where the Amish approach really separates itself from what most of us have been doing. The 5th practice is integrating animals into your garden cycle. I know not everyone can do this, and I will give you an alternative in a moment. But if you have the ability to keep even a small flock of chickens, this changes everything. Eli runs his chickens through his garden beds after harvest. He uses a simple movable pen about 4 feet by 8 feet made from 2x4s and chicken wire. He sets it over a bed that has just finished producing, and the chickens do 3 things at once. They eat pest larvae and weed seeds that would cause problems next season. They scratch and lightly aerate the top couple inches of soil without the deep disruption of tilling. and they deposit some of the best nitrogen-rich fertilizer you can get right where you need it. He moves the pen every 2 to 3 days so the birds do not overwork any one spot. After about a week on a bed, he removes the chickens, applies his fall compost layers, and seeds his cover crop. The bed gets the benefit of the manure, the pest cleanup, and the aeration all at once. His pest pressure the following spring is measurably lower because of it. If you cannot keep chickens, here is the alternative. Collect rabbit manure from a local breeder or even a local 4-H club. Rabbit manure is one of the few animal manures you can apply directly to garden beds without composting first, because it will not burn your plants. Apply about 2 inches across your beds after harvest. Then layer your compost and straw on top, as I described earlier. It is not quite as effective as the full chicken treatment, but it gets you most of the way there. The 6th and final practice is seed saving from your most productive plants. This is something Eli's family has been doing for generations, and the results compound in a way that most gardeners never think about. Each year, Eli saves seeds only from the plants that produce the most food, resisted disease the best, and handled his local conditions the strongest. He has been doing this with his tomatoes for over 30 years. His tomato plants are now essentially custom adapted to his exact soil, his microclimate, and his growing methods. They produce more than any catalog variety I have ever planted because they have been naturally selected for his specific conditions over decades. You can start this right now. This season, mark your 3 best producing tomato plants, your strongest bean plants, your most vigorous squash. Let a few fruits fully mature past eating stage until the seeds inside are completely developed. For tomatoes, scoop the seeds into a jar with a little water, let them ferment for 3 days at room temperature, then rinse and dry them on a paper plate for about a week. Store them in a paper envelope, not plastic, in a cool, dark place. They will stay viable for 4 to 6 years. The first year, you will not notice much difference. By year 3, you will start to see plants that seem to belong in your garden. By year 5, you will have varieties that are genuinely yours. I wish someone had told me this when I started homesteading. 30 years of seed saving is 30 years of your garden adapting to you. Before I wrap up, let me run through a few patterns I see all the time that will undermine everything we just talked about. I made every one of these mistakes myself, so there is zero judgment here. The first pattern is reaching for synthetic fertilizer when things slow down. It is the most natural response in the world. Your plants look hungry, so you feed them. The problem is that synthetic nitrogen, the fast-acting kind you find in those blue granules, actually suppresses the soil biology you're trying to build. Research out of the University of Illinois showed that long-term synthetic nitrogen use can reduce mycorrhizal colonization by up to 40%. You are trading a short-term boost for a long-term decline. Here is what I learned from my Amish neighbors. Add more compost and let the biology deliver the nutrients at a pace the plants can actually use. It is slower, it is less dramatic, and it works permanently instead of temporarily. The second pattern is cleaning up too thoroughly in fall. I used to pull every spent plant, rake every fallen leaf, and leave my beds bare and tidy for winter. It looked great and it felt responsible. But bare soil is dying soil. It is exposed to erosion, temperature swings, and ultraviolet light that kills the surface biology you need most. Eli's beds always look messy going into winter, covered in straw and crop residue and half-decomposed compost. That mess is protecting everything underneath. Leave the mulch. Leave the roots of your spent plants in the ground. Let it look untidy. Your soil will thank you in spring. The third pattern is watering frequently and shallowly. Most gardeners water a little bit every day or every other day. This trains roots to stay near the surface where the moisture is, which makes your plants more vulnerable to heat and drought. The Amish approach is to water deeply and less often, about 1 to 1.5 inches per week, delivered in 1 or 2 sessions. This drives roots down deep where the soil stays cooler and more consistently moist. Once you build the organic matter I described, your soil will hold that water like a sponge instead of letting it run right through. I went from watering every other day to twice a week, and my plants actually looked healthier. They were tougher, more resilient, and they produced more. Now let me pay off what I promised at the beginning. The mid-season rescue technique that Eli calls tired soil tea. I watched him make this for the first time about 8 years ago when I mentioned that my August garden always seems to hit a wall. Everything looks great through June and July, and then production just falls off a cliff. He told me most soil runs low on active biology by midsummer because the heat and heavy production exhaust the microbial populations faster than they can rebuild. Here is exactly how he makes it. Take a 5-gallon bucket and fill it with water. If you are on city water, let it sit uncovered for 24 hours to let the chlorine off gas, because chlorine will kill the very microbes you are trying to multiply. Add 2 big handfuls of finished compost, about 4 cups worth. Add 1 cup of unsulfured molasses, which you can find at any grocery store for a couple of dollars. The molasses feeds the bacteria and fungi in the compost, causing their populations to multiply rapidly. Stir it vigorously for about 30 seconds, twice a day for 2 days. After 48 hours, strain out the solids through an old t-shirt or cheesecloth and apply the liquid directly to your garden beds at a rate of about 1 gallon per 25 square feet. Do this every 2 weeks from mid-July through the end of August. The first time I used this, my August tomato production increased by roughly 30% compared to the previous year. Same varieties, same beds, same watering schedule. The only difference was the tea. Eli just smiled when I told him and said, "Now you are feeding the soil, not the plant." That is when I knew I finally understood what he had been teaching me all along. If what I shared today resonated with you, I want you to know this is really just the starting point. Homestead Hank's 30-day Amish garden protocol covers the complete system in detail. Everything from the soil revival methods we talked about today to natural pest defense strategies, water-wise garden design, full companion planting layouts, and a complete year-round harvest calendar that tells you exactly what to plant and when for every USDA zone. It also includes the 4-bed rotation maps drawn out for you, cover crop seed mixes by region, and a compost troubleshooting guide that took me 20 years of mistakes to compile. You can grab it for $19.99 at homesteadhankbooks.com. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description. I genuinely believe it will change how you grow food for your family. That same quarter-acre plot is going into its 6th year on this system, and I have no doubt it will produce more this year than last. That is the promise of soil that is truly alive. It does not wear out. It wakes up. I would love to hear how your garden responds when you start putting these practices to work. Drop me a comment and let me know. Until next time, good growing to you.